Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Now, today we're joined by a new guest, and I'm going to start with dropping the bomb. Why are you called the anabolic scientist, Will? Tell us all.
Because I'm secretly the designer of all the steroids for all the underground labs in the country, Crown Pharma, Alpha Pharma, you name it, I make it. I am the Walter White of the fitness industry. No, I am a scientist, and if you're on YouTube, you can probably see the degrees and shit in the background. Half of them my wife's, they're not all mine. I'm not that OCD and clever. But yeah, I started foundation degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree in molecular biology and biosciences. I'm at the back end of my PhD in molecular biology and biophysics, which is looking at MRSA and why that's resistant to treatment. And I'll be finishing that probably in February and start writing that up. And I also have a master's in performance nutrition as well. So my science side is that. The anabolic side is, I'm not too small, so I bodybuild. So anabolic and but contrary to popular belief, it's got fuck all to do with steroids.
Yeah, I showed my other half, Matt, your photo, and I said, you're coming on the pod, and he was like, "Fucking hell, he's massive." And it's a gateway for a compliment because often, yeah, it is. In bodybuilding, you get different people, right? It can be pretty ego driven, but you do get people that are you're always striving for the next thing, and you maybe don't notice. Well, actually, I'm pretty wham now, so yeah, I thought, you need to know.
I thank you. No, honestly, I appreciate that because I was talking to my wife about this yesterday. She just did the PCA Yorkshire in Hull, and she was like, this whole season, the big thing for her has been like, I'm not going to be competitive in PCA because I'm a natty, and like the girls are massive, and I'll look, you've never seen yourself stood side by side these people, you have no idea, but they look huge in the photos on the road. And for me, it's always the case. Like I'll look at people and like, fuck, they're huge. Like, and I remember seeing like the NFM the last time I competed. I looked at one day backstage, one day Kimura, however you pronounce his name.
Yep, I know
And
you.
he's just a big round guy, right? And I looked at him backstage and I'm like, well, okay, he's won, and I'm maybe looking for second, maybe against these guys. And then but I saw obviously I did win the show and etc. But that's not to plug the win. But like when I saw the photos of me side by side, I'm like, because I'm plucking my head going, he's way bigger than me. And then I looked at myself side by side. I'm like, oh, well, hang on. Like, we've both got our strengths and weaknesses, but I did not look out of place. But that's the way it works. Like, you always do that. So I'm like, I'm tiny. And then I look at the photos. I'm like, they're wrong. It's not. I'm still tiny. Someone's photoshopped this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going to talk about how to have a sort of life balance, as it were, and being a coach that really does give a fuck, but also has a life. But I really like what you touched on there because it's something that comes up on the pod a lot. And always when a male guest sort of touches on this, it's always interesting to hear it from a male point of view, because I think quite often people assume that it's just females that are like, oh, I'm not lean enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. But actually, men are just the same. And if not, there's almost a bit more relevance on, am I big enough? Am I big enough? And what you actually have to do to accrue muscle tissue and be able to keep getting bigger. It's mental for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it happens and I think what you tend to find is like, I think the deeper you get into like, or not prep, but like bodybuilding, the longer you prep, the more things you find. If you really love bodybuilding, like I always try and think of, right, you've got the people that will do a few shows and they'll be like 2 or 3 years they're done, and that's totally fine. It's not being judgmental. It's just some people want to give it a go and they'll be like, right, I'm done. Like I had a client yesterday, he just wanted to give it a shot, and just based on where he's at in his life now, he's like, right, done that, it's cool, tick the box, all good, I'm finished, perfectly fine. But then you've got people that, like, I grew up watching the Jay Cutler Rip to Shreds DVDs, and I'd sit there like,
Wow.
and Dragon Ball Z as a kid, like I've just always loved the hypermuscular stuff. But yeah, I think with that, like you're always looking for the next thing, like you say, and you're always looking for something else to improve, and you're always looking at somebody else. Grass is always greener. Oh, well, they've got rounded delts, they've got this, that, and the other. And for me, over the best bit of advice I can give anybody with that sort of stuff is, like, I used to pay attention to a lot of what what a lot of the other competitors were doing, and I'd be like, right, who am I up against? Try and be tactile about it. But actually, I found it was the worst thing in the world. So I quite literally, I call it Jedi mode, where if I'm like, pre-show week, I'll try and shut down everything. I'll literally go onto my, to the extent where I don't actually go onto my Instagram normally, I'll use the Meta Business Suite. I'll reply to my messages through the Meta Business Suite and the comments, so I don't have to see the feed, and I'll schedule my posts on there, because if my head's in a position where I'm like, right, I'm happy with where I'm at. I don't need to see this person or that person and think, and then doubt myself. But, and then on the other side of that, even though, like, another thing that's really helpful, especially if you prep yourself, is, I mean, first of all, if you don't prep yourself, you need a coach. You should always have a third party, in my opinion, just to even pull your head back. Like how I've done this season, I have 2 or 3 people that I trust, that know me well, that know my physique well, that have seen me compete over the years, and effectively I'll basically just send them photos every once in a while, not every week, because obviously they may as well pay them for coaching then, but just to have that kind of valid viewpoint. But they have people you can trust. So for me, that's usually Matt from and Will Smart, because they'll know they've grown up with me, or they've worked, you're being a pussy, and that's all I need. Like, you're good, you're not, you need a feed, you look tired, like, and it just kind of helps me verify my own thoughts, rather than am I acting on hunger or emotion or something like that. But yeah, it's one of those, you can be your own worst enemy at times, and I think having someone on the side, and my wife as well, she's very good with that. I was resistant to it initially, because I was like, well, she's my wife, she's going to tell me what I want to hear, but she's a very smart woman, and the longer I've gone into it, and I've actually gone, right, you know, actually maybe do just trust your instincts, that she will tell you what you need to hear, and not just mollycoddle you. She's been very helpful this season as well, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with everything you've said there. And actually, I coach my other half, and he gives me, so I have a coach, but he gives me another eye. It's almost like, because we live together as well, you know, especially in a prep, he's seeing things change every day in life form, as it were. And at first it was like, is it because he loves me? And then it's like, when it's the other way around, I'm like, well, no, it's not, because you're looking at it as a physique, and there is no point in blowing smoke up someone's ass unless they are on track, because it's incredibly detrimental. And I think, probably from what you said, you know, we're competitive people. We're not doing it to sort of have a bit of fun here. It's like, you know, very serious to us. So if then they will say, no, you look really good, and actually you don't, but it is a hard conversation with clients as well. You know, it's quite often that I'll get guests on the pod, and when we talk through coaching competitors, and it's like that reality of, if someone's not ready, having to have those conversations. And I'm sure you'll agree, being honest from the start and creating that solid relationship when you start with a client, and then carrying that all the way through, because not only are you putting them on stage, right? We could easily be like, well, I don't want to put someone on stage if they're not ready, but also, you know, it's not good for them. Are they going to enjoy the sport and have longevity in the sport if you're saying you should have won, and all of the stuff that does happen?
Yeah, no, 100%. And the honesty, that's one thing I'm very, very pro with in my coaching. I think that's, like, to touch on, like I guess I dive straight into the coaching, being a coach that gives a fuck. I think that's just, it's absolutely instrumental. Like, the guy, for example, that competed yesterday, like, we got him absolutely peeled, and it, like, in someone's first season, you know how rare that is for someone to be able to push that far and just to nail it. Like, and I said to him last night, I said, like, I'm just so proud of you for how you've, you know, obviously for how you've done and how hard you work. People don't do that. Most people don't get this in like the first 3 seasons. Like, I didn't do it in my first 3. I didn't get as lean as him in my first 3 seasons. And I'll say that to him open and honestly. I'll say, look, there's the photos. Like, and I think, you know, you have to do that. And a lot of coaches will put themselves on a pedestal where they'll go and try and either, you know, one way or the other, they won't be realistic with their clients, or they'll fear being vulnerable or truly honest. They'll think like, oh, well, if they knew that I didn't get in shape, then what? But no, I think for me, having that complete honesty and showing where you've been and the struggles that you've had, one, it makes you more relatable, and 2, they just respect you more. And for going back to the example I was going to give for him, when he said, like, you know, he'd gotten home from the show and he was like, right, in terms of condition, he was absolutely spot on, one of the most conditioned on stage, if not the most conditioned on stage. But he's a Grand Masters client. He's 60 and he's a lifetime natty, and he competed in a lifetime natty fed. But all the other guys that have been in that fed, they've been competing for like 10-20 years. Like, they've been bodybuilding for ages, and there is just far too much of a size gap to close between him and then he's 60. How much size are you going to be able to put on? And when he said, I think this is, this has been fun, this is great, I've done what we wanted to achieve, etc., etc. But I don't think I'm going to continue this long term because there's other things. And I said, 100%, mate. I said, one of the discussions I'm going to have with you in the debrief, which we'll have probably later on today, is based on the size gap between you guys. You can't control your turns if you can't control their size. And ultimately, if you've got somebody who's in equivalent condition, equivalent balance, equivalent symmetry, etc., etc., but they are bigger than you, they will win. And either you can, at 60 years old, start chasing the dragon to put on as much size in the next 5 years as possible. And as a natural, there is very little you can do because they're all working the same as well. And even if we are absolutely perfect, like why would you want to spend that amount of time at that age when you should be enjoying your life, going through the turmoil and the stress and the constraints of prep? I mean, it's lovely, it's fun.
Yeah.
But at that age, I wouldn't want you to. And that was the discussion I was going to have with you. And obviously, as a client, that's for me. I don't know whether or not he's going to carry on coaching if he wants me to coach in the office, like just to continue or not. But I don't care because at the end of the day, I'm not going to try and chain him to my fucking book because he's, I think, well, you can get shredded and we can get you bigger and stuff. That we'll have the discussion when it comes to it. But ultimately, what's right for him, like you got to go with that, and you have to have those discussions with clients. Otherwise, you'll never have that trust with them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, on that note, it's not something I've sort of delved into as much on the pod before. So I'd be interested to hear your take. From a coach's standpoint, it sounds like we're very much in line with how we coach and that realistic and honest approach. And we know what it takes to get where we have, to gain success in the sport. And like you said, the first few seasons, there's a lot of lessons, you can get leaner, etc. Now, all of those lessons and experiences we've had, that then for me, it definitely personally sits with me if I'm going to work with a competitor to be completely open and honest about how subjective the sport is. In my eyes, what you need to do to facilitate what your goals are and to make sure they're realistic. And sometimes I say to Matt, I'm like, I don't want to come across that prep is like this, more extreme than it is. But in my mind, in a prep, it's an extreme sport and you are pushing to levels that there's health costs potentially, for that period of time, like you sort of said there about, do you put your life on the line, as it were, for a prep, etc., etc. And for me, it's so important when I start with that consult call to say, this is exactly what it takes. You're not clearing the calendar for 4 weeks for, a small diet. It's like, this could be 6, 8, 10 months if you qualify for finals, etc. Is that a similar way to how you would have these conversations?
Yeah, and I've got it's a combination of that and if my camera moves, it's because I've got a really fancy AI camera that tracks my movement. Pretty cool. But I got this, again, very small tangent, but I got it because if I was demonstrating stuff while I'm doing check-ins, it's fucking genius. If you look for, I don't know, in the top corner of the screen, that ICO thing on Amazon, I think it's 130 quid, worth every damn penny, because if I'm like wanting to demonstrate a back double or something, they can just watch me move. It's great. Anyway, that's bonus tip. So good. But yeah, I mean, I think so. So when I set up a new client, one thing I do is I create a client roadmap, and that for me is absolutely essential. And we teach that. So I have got I'm just going to shamelessly plug my course anyway, but I have got an online course for physique coaches that's evidence-based, but also, my own experience as a coach, a bit of a weld between, the meathead versus the lab coat, blending the two together, what's practical and real world. And one of the concepts I teach in that is the concept of road mapping, because a lot of coaches, they'll get a client through and they will say, I want to lose fat, I want to do a prep. And they go, right, Sal, here's your diet deficit, let's go. And it's like, okay, so we're just perpetually doing this until we're lean. Okay, fine. And the way motivation works is people work, and there is solid science behind this. People work with starts of everything. So new year, new me, new month, new week. I'll start on a Monday. I'll start next month. We always look for focal points, right? No one starts a training program on a Wednesday, but why? Why the fuck not? It's a Wednesday. If you've, deloaded for 3 days and you feel fine, well then start on a fucking Wednesday. Who cares?
Yeah.
But we have this, this calendar system, and it's just how, culture and society's evolved. So when you start a client on a client journey, and they come to you and they're like, right, I want to lose fat. They're highly motivated. They've made the decision. They're like, right, I found this coach. They're the one, and blah, 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 blah. And they'll be sound for a month, maybe. And then once that initial like carrot's not been dangled, or that carrot dangle has started to, you know, distance itself, it's not quite as clear in sight. Then you're in a, okay, well, now we've got 5 months left. How do I keep them entertained? Without a roadmap, you've got no idea. So I will literally block out how I feel like the prep's going to go, and I'll just start from the prep and work backwards effectively. So I'll say show date here, we are at this way, and ideally I never take a client on, I will refuse to take a client on unless I have at least 3 months of pre-prep work before we start the prep, because I haven't got a clue how their body responds to anything. Unless they are super switched on, seasoned, whatever, like, and I can see on their social media, and they've got a clear track record of data, and, you know, they know that this many calories roughly equals to that, and they're already in that mode, right? But if not, you need at least 3 months with me before I can even entertain taking you into a prep, because it's pointless, right? That's wasted time. If you've got 6 months to prep, and I'm going to spend 3 months figuring out how your body's going to respond to things, it's not going to be efficient. And I'm not going to put someone through that going into the expectation side if I can't guarantee that every one of those fucking months is going to be as productive as possible, because they're paying you a lot of money, and it's a lot of stress, a lot of sacrifice. So that's one, like having a roadmap and reverse engineering backwards and going, right, we know roughly you're going to need to be, and part of this is, you know, the eye that you need to have. You need to kind of, you know, see into the future. If they haven't dieted before and you don't know what they're like when they're truly lean, you kind of got to go Mr. Miyagi and go, I think 130 pounds, whatever, and then work backwards from there, right? We're going to go at this rate. I reckon that, you know, you're probably going to need, and you give some contingency, like block in a couple of weeks for a diet break here or there. I think, right, okay, well, they're going to, if they've not dieted before, seriously, they might go for 3 months before they start to fall apart. But we need to go pretty aggressive from this point based on the way that they're at. So we might just need a couple of weeks of break, or you could have a week here and a week there, but you've planned for it. So having that there, and every single time I do that with a client, they sit. Every emoji that comes up is usually the face. Like, I've never had this before. This is incredible, but it's just fucking basic service. Like, it's not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So that is number one. And then from there, so I tie that then into the expectations, and I'll say, right, I'll use that cleverly. So I'll say, and because humans like numbers as well, and obviously I'm a numbers guy because science.
They do.
There we go. But I'm not a numbers guy to the extent where I make people worry about it. I'm like, right, let me do the brain stuff. You don't need to worry about that. You just need to be that by that. So, but when you present the numbers and say, right, we're here, we're there, because some people will create this picture in their head of thinking, I've probably only got 20 pounds of these, right? It's always fucking more than you think it is going to be. So when you put the numbers down on paper and you plan out on a calendar and you say, you know, realistically, we need to lose 40 pounds. And that, if we block that out based on your deficit, if I put you in a 30% deficit, which is a pretty fast crack for a lot of people, the most I'll push a lot of people in sustainable, if they can hack it. Very few people are like this. I've got a couple of nutcases that can do this long term, but again, for muscle retention and stuff like that, it's not really recommended, especially for natties. But like 40% might be the peak. But without the numbers side of things, they'll then block it out and say, right, roughly, you know, 30% deficit over this time frame, we'll lose about 20 pounds by this date. And then they can see, okay, shit, even if we're cranking like in fifth gear for 3 months, we're still going to be just about on point, right? And I will always block to have people ready 4 weeks early, because I want to make sure that they're ready with enough time. We can practice peaks if we need to, this, that, and the other. And once you've got that, and then you have that kind of the base sort of numbers that people can ground themselves with, and they can relate to, and they go, okay, shit, you've thought about this, it's there. There's always some trust there because you've clearly made a plan. And then from there, it's a case of then saying, right, so then we set the expectations and say, okay, so you can see that there is very little room for error. When I say no off plans, every single one of those off plans, and do the calculations, I just do a mock one. I just say, right, a Domino's pizza, and I'll pull it up while I'm doing the walkthrough of the plan. I'll say Domino's pizza, 2,000 calories, and then you think, a couple of kickers won't hurt, 500. Oh, and I'll share a tub of Ben & Jerry's in my other half, 250. That's 3,000 calories. Your deficit at 30%. And this is really what fucks females up, because you guys have got the same, so you can eat, you know, 1-to-1 with us nearly. Yeah. But in terms of like calorie expenditure and intake, a Domino's will absolutely destroy you once a week as a female competitor. But for most anyway, but there are some freaks that can just eat and then be fine. But, you know, it's very, but and that's the other thing, and social media and people seeing these people are like, oh yeah, it's fine, I can cope with it. But that aside, once you put the numbers out and say, right, that's pretty much most of our deficit gone, which means then if you have that pizza once a week and you think it's fine, I've worked really hard. Well, no, actually, this will get you nowhere. And you'll have spent 5 months of being really rigid for 6 days. And then those 2 hours a week that you fucked up on, that can then send you back. You don't term it like that, but like when you put the numbers there and you put it in front of someone, you say, right, this is literally how it is. And, you go back to C code, calories in, calories out. And as long as you educate that and you make sure that they understand, depending on what education level they're at, you might not need to, that expectation is clear. And I think then there is the other side of things where, like you said, like people with the extremities of sport and bodybuilding, people will think that it's extreme all the time. And I think what can put a lot of people off, and this is where the balancing act comes in the art of coaching, is if you not have the discussions beforehand, they're screwed post-show because they have got no insight or context as to what an actual bodybuilder's lifestyle looks like in a 2-year cycle, right? For those 6 months you're prepping, and it is restrictive, but after that, it doesn't mean it has to be restrictive. You can still enjoy meals out, you can still have balance, you can have your off plans, this, that, and the other. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they don't have these conversations, and they don't also have the conversations about it's not all miserable. You're going to be dialed in for this period. And again, another very side tangent, but in the off season, don't worry about it, because here, and you can use this tactically to keep people adhering and say, it's cool, we're going to be gunning here, but before we get to prep, I want to make sure that you have an off meal at least once every week and plan it. Like, go to your restaurant, find your favorite brunch spot, find your favorite dinner spot, make a list of things that you want to cook if you're into cooking. And in the month or two before, at the back end of your last mass phase, get them done. Like, enjoy yourself, go out, do some axe throwing, have a couple of drinks, factor it in, not in a way that they're going to get too fat and they're going to not be in a position to be preppable beforehand, but have that, like, pay your dues beforehand, or sorry, well, put some money in the enjoyment bank before you pay your dues. And the same with the other side, and then segue on, get them to make a list of all the things they want to do, because then you've got a nice little sandwich of nice, shit, nice. And it's not just,
Yeah, but it is true, because I like what you said there about that graduating process as well, because of course, off the back of a prep, ordinarily the night of the show, most people, unless they've got another show, may go for a meal with their family or whatever. And then, you might try and get a couple of weeks on plan, hitting macros again, keeping that structure there. And then gradually you start to up the frequency potentially of, off plan. So it might be every other week, then you might increase it to every week in the off season, and that type of format, because essentially, like you touched on, when people start with a coach, it's often that, right, I've got this fixed date for a 12-week shred or whatever it is. But then what comes after that? And they, of course, pay for 12 weeks. And then it's like, okay, cool. And then that's that period where it's a hard one, right? Sometimes I feel like people need a coach more after the show, through the post-show period, than potentially in the prep in regards to the mental side of things, because the goal is suddenly removed. You've done X amount of time living in your prep life. And then suddenly it's like, all of this is available, and then you've got the external pressures of people thinking you're normal again, all of those thought processes. And particularly for first timers, like, it is a whole new world, isn't it? I'm sure you can remember your first show.
Oh, good Lord. My first show was a fucking disaster post-show. I mean, I shit you not. And this should, because this will be fun for everybody, because most people will probably assume that I've always been systematic, dialed in, controlled. I probably handled my first post-show like a pro. Oh no, good Lord. At the time, if you look for Lucy Ellis on Instagram, she was my partner at the time, she'll tell you the size of the box we had of food that I had accrued for post-show. And this was on top of other, like, meals out and stuff like that. Like, afternoon tea, I'd go for waffles and stuff with friends. But we had a box that was literally about, like, imagine 4 MacBooks in circumference, and then about that high. It weighed 20 pounds. I ate the whole thing over the space of like 3 or 4 days. And obviously she had like this and this, that, and the other. But like, I think from memory, like, stage weight I should have been, if I was like peeled, I would have been like 170. But I put on 20 pounds in 3 days, and it wasn't temporary. It stuck to the extent where I had to go home from work because I had so much edema. Like, my pitting was about that deep, but at least an inch and a half. I couldn't stand because it was so painful. I'd come off all anabolics. My lower back was so destroyed I couldn't stand upright, but from all the fluid retention. I mean, God knows what my blood pressure was, because back then I wasn't tracking it because I was an idiot, because we've all been idiots at some point.
For sure.
And yeah, I mean, this is before I think this is probably in my early days. I think it was my second year of my bachelor's. So I was just getting into like science around the thing. So again, even though, you know, we all make mistakes and we've all been irresponsible at some point, but that was horrendous. But I had no post show. Like, I'm not going to mention the coach that I had at the time, but I had no post show care. In fact, he threw the dummy out of the pram because I didn't place at the show, and he just ghosted me. Somebody asked me on social media like what the feedback was, and I said there's just said I needed to be leaner, and he took that as me saying that he'd messed up the prep. So anyway, I won't mention who he was, but there was no post show discussion, nothing, no care. And he bombed me with drugs as well. I mean, like, I think I was on 100 micrograms of T3 at the time, which was, again, not going to go too deep into the ped side of things, obviously, but this guy was pretty reckless with drug prescription. But I just wanted like my first prep to be, I wanted my first prep to be, I will do whatever coach tells me to do.
Yeah.
So that was it. I had all of this, diuretics were involved. I had the rebound from that, and then had all this food, and it was such a painful process. And my rebound could have been so good with that. It could have been so productive, but I could barely train it because I could barely move. I was doing additional cardio just to sweat, to try and get some of the fluid weight off, hot baths and this, that, and the other. Which for various reasons, post show, it's going to keep those fluid retentive mechanisms upregulated because your body's wanting to, you know, reestablish some normality. But then you're starving, and then, you know, once that Pandora's box has been opened, you are knackered. So the first time I ever do is have those discussions a good few weeks in hand and say, look, post show is going to be harder than prep. I'm not trying to scare you, but like, if you think this is difficult, you're good because you've got an anchor point. You have got that dot on the fucking map, and you are focused on that like a pit bull. Once that's gone, you are screwed. So when it comes to post show, we like this communication that we've got now, like this constant daily, like, you know, like this is going to be a thing for at least 2 or 3 months, because I want to get you to the point where your body's not doing this after you finish your prep. And it doesn't necessarily happen that way. Now, if it depends on someone's prep, right? If you've like, and you can't always get this right with a first timer, because sometimes if you have a first timer and you guess them right, you've done your Mr. Miyagi and everything's perfect, everything's gone well throughout the prep, they land in, they're not in a stressed spot, they've glid in pretty easily, their body's not stressed, it's not tired. Sometimes you'll get someone that's like, right, for whatever reason, it's being stubborn, or they have some shit go on and they don't quite come in as perfectly or as easily as you'd hope they would do, or whatever. Like, it happens. You might have needed to dig them a bit harder towards the end, or their body just may simply just not like being dug that far. Some people just do respond really well, some people don't. And if you are in that position, you can't predict what's going to happen. So everybody has to have the same treatment of, okay, we'll systematically increase things, systematically incorporate this, but try and keep as many things stable as possible, tweak one dial at a time, see how your body responds, look at the data, have a look at your weight, have a look at your progress, and then go from there. And, you know, if anything, I almost spend, I wouldn't say more time, but I spend at least as much time with some of the competitors I have that have, you know, especially with their first shows, post show than that. And like the one person decided that they qualified for the British, and they then, for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, she had some things that she needed to sort. It just didn't fit to do finals. It would have been too inconvenient for her, and we needed to, like, in order to, it wasn't looking likely that she'd win, right? Yeah. So it's a case, well, this is wasted growing time, so let's just get into growing, let's get you the reverse out. And it's been literally a case where every week I'd say, right, pick a restaurant, or pick a movie night with your sister, and alternate each week. And I'd say, right, when you have your movie night with your sister, you have 1,500 calories to spend, your budget. We've incorporated that into your week. So we've kept some low days, kept some high days, and been progressively increasing a baseline. But then I've said, here's your allowance for that meal. Send me through what you're thinking of having. If you've got a clear idea of what you want, and you can do the calorie matching, sound. If you haven't got, if your brain's just meh, but you know you want a chicken burger, like, I'm a very avid cook, and I'm a big foodie. Both my parents taught me to cook when I was like 5. So like, and I mean, like, roast dinner when I was 6 years old, like, that's like my family. But which is great. So the cooking book shelf, like pretty much 90 books. But anyway, so and I said, look, I'll plan something for you. I'll make something for you. So much to the extent where if I see something in a supermarket, my brain's like, oh, so and so really like that post prep. I know, like my client CBB is quite a big Japanese foodie, so he loves his mochi and stuff like that. And I see them in Aldi, I'm like, oh, sweet. Well, let's put that in as his first like part of his reverse and so on.
Yeah.
But because that makes the enjoyment for them. If I can, like, I ask them what they want, get them to give me a brief. When they're in that vulnerable state and they want to grab shit everywhere, and they're, you know, in that knee-jerking, open Pandora's box, shovel everything in, you've got to tame it. And the best way to do that isn't by saying, have a burger and fries every week. Like, I don't give a fuck what I want them to be. I want to know, okay, what's your body telling you? What are you craving? What are you missing? And we'll make it work. It doesn't have to be like, again, if they're craving a pizza, like she said, pizza. And I said, okay, that's cool. We just don't want to have Domino's or Papa John's because it's just excessive, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it turns out that she actually quite liked the Morrison's Make It Your Own ones. So I said, oh, sweet. Well, go pick your toppings and tell me what you're thinking of, and I'll make some adjustments and then go grab it. And then we can have like, I think it was like half a tub of Halo Top or something like that alongside it, and I think it was like crumpet thins or something. But it was, you know, that was that. And then, you know, each week it's been progressively controlled the way out, and it's just been settling down. And there isn't a science to it as to how long it will take every person to settle down and feel a bit more normal. You've just got to take it as it comes and have that communication with them. And when it comes to like meals out, like if she wanted to go out for a, you know, for a birthday party and have, you know, an Italian or something like that, so right, send me the menu and I'll just go and highlight, and I do a traffic light and I'll go green, super good, orange, cool, but that means that you're gonna have to be a little bit more careful on your starter or your dessert, or just have a starter and a main versus a main, starter, main, and dessert. And then red, which is like red to be something like pork belly and a cream sauce with donuts. Like, it's just excess. You're gonna die.
Yeah. Well, I love it as well. Like, I think sometimes when you take clients on, a bit like what you said about your roadmap, when people have maybe had different experiences with coaches, and then they're like, wow, you know, you're spending loads of time on every angle of this, you know, particularly it sounds like you work with sort of the mindset, actually how this person thinks, feels as an individual, what their past is, you know, why are they getting into the sport, what have their experience has been so far, this type of stuff, and actually asking them, what do you fancy? Okay, so let's look at this together. Let's plan it together. And if people receive that well, the coaching relationship is so solidified. And of course, you know, we're talking about how many times you've been to the toilet this week, all of these, you know, in a prep daily, you know, have you been to the toilet? What have you been doing outside of this? How are you feeling with sex life? All this type of stuff. We do ask these questions, and, you know, it might seem that sometimes it's like, well, you know, I want to know everything, but of course it's almost that data collection, but also understanding them as an individual. And for us, of course, when a client's going into a reverse out, even for a photo shoot, you know, we need to be almost thinking like them, because you can foresee things happening, right?
Yeah, you can see where someone's like, you know, the little changes in communication, like when they're, or it's, you can just tell. And but you only know that by giving a shit. Like, if you get to know your clients, you will figure out you'll figure them out as a person. And I think that's a very hard thing to do when it comes to balancing, like, and one of the things I think we mentioned, we talk about was like expectations as a coach and things like that. And
yeah, for sure,
a lot of coaches will have like, they will stay very business, very blunt, this, that, and the other. And for some people, if they have that client base and their client base is in that way, that's fine. But for those that, I guess it really depends on how you run your business, but I would always say it's good to know your clients, and you can still do it. You can still know your clients without having to lose the business side and lose the boundaries. The one thing people need to be careful of is one thing I call the mate trap, which is your clients aren't your mates, and they can become your mates over time. Like, but I think initially, at least for the first like 3 or 4 months, unless you've got a real good judge of character, and you can, and you click with someone like that, and you know, you just know when someone is actually just going to be like somebody you really love working with. Like, I took on somebody recently, and I saw he had a thing about Patron Cafe in his bio, and it was literally the only thing in his bio, and he said still coming to terms with the fact that Patron Cafe no longer exists.
you're like
I was like, Anyway, but we had a bit of banter with that, and it turns out that we ended up getting to the point where he said he'd give me his last bottle if I got him a place in his next show, and I said I'm not taking that off you, mate. But it was just that I knew that we had that that common ground, and we just got on like that. So with him, it's very easy because I know that we're already on the same page. He's pretty much like somebody I'd hang about with anyway. But initially, I'd always think you've got to be careful with setting boundaries with people, and when it comes to having those expectations, because you need to have that position of not just trust but authority as well. So you're not barking at them in terms of giving them orders and instructions. They need to respect what you're telling them as something coming from a professional, but in the same sense, you need to make them feel like you're approachable. And the balance between that, in terms of how you don't need to sit and chat to them all day long and have banter and talk about TV series and this, that, and the other. I think once you get into that, it does become more of you lose that authoritative position, and they feel like they can just sort of almost take liberties with it. But that doesn't mean that you can't think, and I guess it simply boils down to just giving a shit. When you get to know clients and get to know what matters to them, for me, the best tool that I have for that, in terms of keeping that professional boundary versus, and at the same time getting to know the client enough that they feel like you understand them, is trying to think about what it would be like in their shoes. And it's not a real difficult thing, and I think for coach, and if somebody's never prepped before, I would always advise to a coach to prep and do it prep. I mean, I've got a friend of mine who's a coach as well. He's thinking of doing a show. I'm doing a photo shoot, but there's this show in a few weeks, and he said I'm considering doing it, but I don't know if I should. And I said, mate, if you're already in shape, just do it. I said, even if you've not got any aspirations to compete, just getting to that point and being there, no one's going to see the photos. No one's going to look back and go, oh, I remember that show 2 years ago where so looked like an asshole.
Nobody cares.
Remember.
Yeah.
Nobody will. I don't even know who you are. But the fact that you can put yourself in their shoes, and know when you're coaching them how they feel, then you can then have these conversations and say, okay, so I remember when I was in this position, like I said, with a box of food and being left for dead after my first show. I know what that feels like. And for me, that was such a painful experience. There's not a cat in hell's chance any client will ever go through that fucking experience with me.
Sure.
To the extent even ghost me post show, I'm like, hey, you okay? Hey, you okay? And okay, I will get to a point where if I generally have a rule of 3 or 4. And if somebody doesn't reply within 3 or 4, then fine. Because at the end of the day, for me, that's a respect thing. You need to if I'm checking up on you, you reply.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just putting yourself in their shoes and just asking and trying to think how you want to be treated. And, you can ask the relevant things that are going to help you without having to, ask what their favorite color is and this, that, and the other. And if you have that, it builds such a solid foundation for them. And it makes that can make or break someone's experience from being, oh, bodybuilding was fun. And actually, I'm quite keen to do this again, to that was miserable. They were right. They're all fucking egotistical assholes. And this is an extreme sport, and I'm never doing this again. You can completely change someone's experience, and it's not just as you know, it's not something that we just you just go in and go out of. It's 6 months of your life and a lot of sacrifice from all angles, professionally, personally, relationships, a lot. So
it's one of those things we've sort of mentioned Instagram a few times, and you can get led into this sport so much more easily now because it is accessible. And certainly for me, it was my gateway. I had no sporting background, nothing at all. Suddenly bodybuilding, wow, this is fucking cool. And I'm seeing these physiques. I went to a show and I was sort of, the fire was lit, as it were, and I continued on. But in that same token, it's because it's so accessible, people feel almost it's okay, so it's a bit of an extension of a normal diet, but that extension where you go past that, what a diet would be lean to stage lean, depending on the category, of course, it's a very different ball game. And we've spoken about first timers, you never would have dug to those depths before. And of course, like you say here, the impact on relationships, people around you are going to think, what the fucking hell is this person doing? This thing. So the education behind that as well, to communicate with people around you, because we're also talking about, us giving a fuck, but the balance there, being transparent that in a prep, balance isn't really a thing as such. You know, it's a bit of a funny one there, but there is light after the show. But let's do this slowly, and giving that personal anecdote, I certainly agree, because there's nothing that quite touches that, is there? You know, all those experiences we've had from fucking it up ourselves to go, I don't want you to go through that, you know?
Yeah, and I think, do you know what, the communication with others is so important. Like,
Yeah.
that's something which, like, because it is, I think you mentioned earlier, like, you know, lifestyle coaching, mindset and stuff, and that is 100. And I think it annoys me that it's become such a, I mean, it's just the way social media is perpetuated, but the word life coach has just been, you know, shat on. But you have to be a life coach, like, because unfortunately, modern life means that we're not taught to be humans anymore. Like, it's so that, and the communication that you have with other people, and like, I think with yeah, so one of the things which I think is really important, touching base on what you're saying, communicating to people around you, is that for us in our echo chamber on Instagram, the people that we follow and so on, I always use the phrase of, if you spoke to, not Donald Trump because he's a fucking joke of a human, but like yeah, so pick any other top business owner, like, you know, a FTSE 100 guy owning of the maybe not Tesla guy, what's Tesla, Elon Musk, somebody
like Diary of a CEO or someone.
yeah, something. I mean, well, Stephen Bartlett, no, I can't. Anyway, I'll shut up about that. But here's some of the guests he has
on a pedestal.
It was like one of them that said that you could grow muscle by imagining it. Like, okay, of course you can. If you feel positive about growing muscle, you'll gain 11%.
Well, we have to actually talk about this, because Matt, I've overheard him doing some voice notes about people that have listened to a Diary of a CEO episode and then gone, oh, right, well, I don't need to do what you're telling me to do, because I heard this guy's a specialist on the Diary of the CEO, and it's like, oh, he doesn't vet anyone. He just gets them on the podcast.
It's my pain point, because he's just like, he doesn't stop and go, hang on, that doesn't sound right. He'll just be like, oh, really? And again, I love the way, let's just, okay, I'm gonna stop there, because I could, yeah, anyway. But this muscle growth, like, imaginary thing was just hilarious. But Lane Norton shut it down, like, in a pretty hilarious way, as he always does on his feed recently. So have a look at it if you want to look at it, but it's quite funny, in typical Lane fashion. Anyway, communication with others. So yeah, ask any kind of big businessman if they would have a clue who Ronnie Coleman or Jay Cutler is. Like, I mean, Ronnie's pretty prolific, but they still probably wouldn't have a clue. And then the other example I use is, when you are 55 years old or 60 years old, whatever, you're sat down at the dinner table, you've got, if kids are your prerogative, whatever, but you're sat with your family friends having a glass of red, and you're at the dinner table, you've had a bolognese, you're having your coffee, you wind down. If you drink coffee before night, you psychopath, or coffee before bed. Apologies to all the Italians there, but they never sleep anyway. God, digging myself a hole. Kidding. I love Italy. I'm off there this weekend anyway.
I love you guys.
So when you're sat with these people, like your life people, you know, and maybe like maybe your daughter goes to school with their daughter or something like that, and you're having a chat, and they're like, I always try and say, right, when you're having a discussion about bodybuilding, how do you want that discussion to pan out? Do you want to be sat there with, I mean, the extreme scenario would be you've got a freaking oxygen line up your nose because you fucked yourself up that much and you've had a heart attack and you're barely hanging on, and you're now working in a shit job because you lost your job and you ruined your life and made really bad decisions because bodybuilding was all that mattered at the time. And that's like the extreme scenario. But then the other extreme could be like, you had a really good opportunity in a career progression path, whatever, but you were so involved in this bodybuilding sport and you couldn't afford to, step away from it for your professional side of things because you were just too focused on prep.
Yeah.
How do you want those people to respond? Or how would you feel comfortable with those people responding? Would you feel proud of yourself if they then went, so what did you do, Sarah? Like, or let's talk about your week. Or do you think they're going to respond with, yeah, it sounds worth it?
Yeah.
And you've got these, couple of bronzes and silvers, maybe a couple of gold on your shelf, and some posing trunks that no longer fit you because, well, you're well out of shape and you haven't competed in years. How do you want that conversation to pan out? And so that's on the start of the communication side. I always try and think of just, again, that's an example of our echo chamber, Instagram, who we follow, this, that, and the other. If you followed all the business people, We don't see none of this shit, right? And they probably, business people will follow business people and success people. So this is very abnormal, and it can be very difficult to see the wood from the trees without actually experiencing other things in life, doing other things, going and talking to other people, interacting with people, alienating yourself from friends and family that aren't in your circle. And that I find a lot of people, especially when they first start out, because there's that it's almost like a visceral response. And I had it when I first started. I'd like when somebody would ask me like, "Oh, you're eating that again?" Like you do kind of get like, can you just shut the fuck up? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not unhealthy. No, it's not obsessive. But the longer I've competed for and the longer I've coached for, the more you sit back and reflect. And I'm big into journaling, and I've linked a journal we might talk about later, but I've linked it for the one that I use that's really useful for the pod anyway, if anybody wants it. But like the more you reflect and sit and think, where are these people coming from with that conversation? And there will generally be people that are just, I don't know, they'll have a vegan badge and they'll, not against vegans, but I'm against people that will or I get annoyed by people that brand themselves as this and everybody else is shit, right?
Yeah,
Because everyone's got different interests. But you'll have somebody, the vegan CrossFitter, that's the first thing they say when they come into the room is, "I'm a vegan CrossFitter." Oh, meat. Yeah, have you watched, what's the documentary? The really shit one. I don't know, the one that was
what
on
about
Netflix.
vegan?
That yeah.
The
Game
crazy
Changers.
one.
That was
Everyone's like, oh.
Game Changers. I think it was. And like, oh yeah, well Arnold, etc. So there's always people like that. But then generally, most people, when they're saying, "Oh, how can you eat that again? Is that all you eat?" Like they're probably not coming from a place of trying to be horrible. They're just innocent people that have no idea. And when your nan's saying, "Surely you can eat more than that, it's not very much," or "You're looking a bit thin," like it's your nan. Like
Yeah.
you look thin. Back in your nan's day, when you looked like that, you were unwell. She's
Yeah.
not being a dick.
Yeah.
She's just she's just bothered about your well-being. And I think a lot of the time people will just knee jerk and say, "No, I just have to do this," and it's not. No, you're wrong. It's not. There's nothing wrong with this, grandma. But why don't you just sit down and explain it and say, "Okay, because we're trying to achieve this, and this isn't. It's not always. Don't worry. This is just a temporary thing." Much like when, and use an analogy. Say like when Dwayne Chambers was prepping for the 100 meters or whatever, or Usain Bolt's prepping for this. He has to go through really stringent training to get to that level of fitness and conditioning and so on to be able to perform in the race. And this is the same for me, except instead of it being a performance-oriented goal, it is it is performance to some extent, but in prep, obviously you're losing body fat. So it's my performance is how I look. And in order to do that, I need to, lose the body fat. And although you might think I'm not fat, because to you, I don't look fat and I'm clearly not fat.
Yeah.
But to be judged against the other people and to do well against these people, that is what they are looking for. But it's fine. I'm healthy. There's nothing wrong. I'm not dying. And just have that conversation with them instead of just being, visceral about it. And some people will, they'll push back a bit and this, that, and say, surely it's not healthy. But again, if you view it from a place of them being horrible, there's a very big difference when someone's like, "I'm really concerned about you. I'm referring you to such and such mental health charity and they're gonna call you at 12 p.m. because they're concerned about you." That's very different. Someone that's just like, "Why are you eating that?" And if just have those conversations and say to people like, your significant other, like, okay, if they're not in the bodybuilding world, like we're both lucky enough to have partners that are, and we understand it. And I'm so grateful that Steph has been through it and is going through it. Whether or not she wants to compete after this season, I don't know. We'll see. We're always at that point where we're like, "Are we going to do another one? Are we going to do another one?" But like,
Okay, one more.
but at least I know, even if she carried on or I carried on and the other one didn't, we've both had that experience and we know that we know what the other person has been through, so we understand it. But for those that don't, then, well, how can you? How are they meant to know unless you explain it to them? So you sit down and you say, "Look, we're not going to be able to have the pizzas and so on. This is really important to me. This means a lot to me. It's not going to be forever. And when it comes to it, I promise you, we'll do some other fun stuff. We can go on twilight spa days, or we'll go for walks, or we'll do some axe throwing or something like that." I've never actually been axe throwing, but I've referenced it twice. I should probably go and do it because it's clearly a thing on my mind. Maybe anyway. This is where my brain's going with respect to like prep and trying to find entertaining things to do to keep myself sane.
Well, yeah, but silly things like that, though, it's sort of, well, I say silly things, but I'm the same. Like you, in essence, it's about being a bit creative, I think, sometimes as a bodybuilder to incorporate, I say incorporate, like it's like got to be strategic, but how can you spend quality time with those people that you're referencing here, but them not feel like, suddenly they've lost, oh, Sarah's gone for 6 months now, see you later. There is a point in prep, right, where it's like, guys, I'm checking out here. I've got to go dark mode at times, and it's often the case. But particularly at the start of prep, I say to people, you just come off the back of a surplus, potentially more than likely. You're motivated. Everything's pretty dialed in. Your structure, etc., etc. You can still go and do things, but it doesn't mean that everything has to be around food. But of course, human nature is, okay, so we'll go for a coffee and a slice of cake, or we'll go for a meal. Well, let's go axe throwing. Let's go for a walk. Let's do things within, what I'm able to do in a prep and keep that there. And something we spoke about over voice message before recording is how you and Steph, are managing being incredibly busy work life, both doing the bodybuilding thing and, also your education, etc. Actually how that works as a coach and a bodybuilder. It'd be super, super cool to hear, of course, how you guys try and negate that and spend time with each other as well.
Yeah, so that's I mean, my wife is an absolute fucking superstar, and I cannot sing her praises enough, because I wish more people knew how, because she doesn't put it up out on social media, because she's like the most humble person you'll ever meet. But for reference, she's a senior doctor, she's a registrar in palliative care. I lose track of the amount of things that she has. She's currently just completing her master's while she's doing a double training pathway in the NHS, which is hard enough as it is. So she's double training in palliative and acute medicine. And at the same time, she's also doing this master's degree in research, because she's doing a research onto it as well. She's finished the master's, she's applying for a PhD and is going for that as well. Well, she's just about finished the master's anyway. I'm not sure exactly where she's up to it with getting a cert and all that sort of stuff, but she's done all the paper and all that sort of things. But her daily is she goes into work, into hospitals, and she manages patients that are dying. And sometimes she'll come home and there'll be a 22-year-old with breast cancer that's terminal in a bed, and she, like, somebody that's younger than her with breast cancer, and she's having to come home and shoulder that kind of burden and keep it down. And it's a position, and again, I'm not trying to put her on a pedestal, but I'm trying to exemplify the fact that when people are like, oh well, I'm really struggling with and again, I'm not trying to compare it to everybody else, because everybody's got different relative experiences with what they can, like, everybody's got their gifts and everybody can tolerate different levels of stress and different things, and
Sure.
her job is relative to her and theirs is relative to them. But when you try and put it into perspective, I love her job as an example of that, is because when we think, okay, this is really hard, I have to go to work and come back, like, okay, there's a 22-year-old with breast cancer dying in a hospice, and we're moaning about bodybuilding and job. Like, we're happy, we're healthy, we can afford to do this, we're privileged enough to do this. It is a privilege to do this because it costs money, we don't get anything from it. If you can afford to do bodybuilding and have a coach, my God, you are one of the luckiest people in the world. Like, you get to do this. So that, without going down that rabbit hole too far.
Yeah, but this is honestly, I talk about this all the time. Like, no joke, Will, on my posts, on the podcast. This is a choice, and there's people that are starving in the world without that choice. And it's a massive message. So this is why I'm like, preach, because it is a privilege. And your example of Steph, it's probably quite a hard one, because it's like, well, I love her. She is my queen, and I don't want to sound like I'm just blowing smoke up her ass, but it is. You're seeing it from an outside point of view as well. Like, that's incredible. And then prepping as well, of course.
And I honestly don't know how she does it, because, like, for me, like, I'm very, very, very busy with my day to day. Like, every single, again, not putting myself on a pedestal, but every hour of my day from 6 through till 8 o'clock is blocked, and I don't stop. But even when I do switch off, I don't switch off. Like, it's even worse in prep somnia. So I'm constantly working, constantly doing stuff. But I own 2 businesses. I'm in control of what I want to do when I want to do it. Right.
Yeah.
My PhD, I'm starting to write up my thesis in February, because I could defer it to whenever I wanted to. Like, I have the choice. She hasn't. Like, she has to get up and go do that, and she's managed to juggle and coordinate that with her prep and being a wife. And it's and being, you know, when we take it in turns when it comes to, you know, prepping and all that sort of stuff. So for example, when she's got a show week, I'm in not prep bitch mode. I'm in cheerleader mode. Because I don't mind being a prep bitch, but I don't want to call her a prep bitch. You know, so yeah, I'm cheerleader or she's cheerleader, and we've got a really nice little system there. Well, the little things like, okay, the house is always clean and tidy, and there's no dishes or anything left, which we don't do anyway. But we are very clean people, just so that nobody gets the wrong impression. We pride ourselves on that. Our mothers that are listening.
Yeah, my mum, she gave it to me. It's a curse, but it's also pretty cool.
It's great. But yeah, so I mean, like the little things, like we coordinate all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to being busy and productive and balancing things, like it is one thing I find that a lot of coaches don't have is they don't have structure and they don't have any kind of organizational framework. Now, we both use Google Calendar for everything, and we actually share our Google Calendar with each other. So she's got access to mine, I've got access to hers. She knows what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And that's because we're so busy. And this is one thing from a relationship productivity kind of, you know, sandwich thing here, which is another nice little tangent. But like when people get to conflict points in relationships and they're like, well, my prep is this and I didn't know that, like we just overcome that, or we overcame that really early on in our relationship. We went, okay, I know what you're doing, so I don't need to get to the point where I'm like, are you free? And you're like, nah, sorry, I'm busy for a week. Like, you know, we weren't living together. Like I already knew what she was doing, so I'm like, right, you know, when you're saying there and there, is there a gap where we could do that or go for walks? Yeah, so. And the thing that we both do with our movable blocks, obviously she's got work blocks where she needs to be somewhere, but with our actual blocks where we control our own things, like her study stuff or my business stuff, we time block. And time blocking, if you head over to, she's got another side business called the Productivity Doctor. She's brilliant with productivity, and I've learned a lot of the things, or pretty much most of the things I've learned with productivity wise from her. And this concept of time blocking is picking units of time, fixed units of time. So not just like, I'm going to sit down and work on this content for 3 hours, or it might be 4 hours, I'm going to work on content for the day. You block things. So you say, and for me, my ideal time block is 60 to 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours if it's something that, you know, I can get stuck into and it's relatively systematic, right? Or needs a bit more time. But I will set that and I'll say work block here. It needs to be a particular topic and a particular theme. So if I'm working on a lecture for the physique lab, for example, it would be, I'm going to work on module 3, unit 2, and I'm going to work on prepping the lecture. So getting the slides done. That is a time block. It's not finished lecture. It's prepping lecture. So getting all the notes and stuff ready. The next time block might be getting the references and the papers to go with it and the resources ready. So that might be another 2 hours. And the next one might be recording the lecture. And each lecture probably takes me about that long anyway. Like it's a fucking balls deep course. But like that's how you block it. Not just I'm working on this for 6 hours, because if you haven't got direction or structure, you're screwed. And like with checking feedback, one error I used to make, because I wanted to be the coach that was just like, I will be as convenient as possible, and I will do check-ins from Friday through till Monday, and I will make sure, like, you just tell me you tell me what day is best for you, and I will do them throughout all hours of those days. But the problem is, because I gave myself all those days to do check-in feedback over the weekend, convenient so people can get their stuff sorted at the end of the week, before the start of the next week, etc. I was just spreading them out throughout the weekend, and productivity-wise, that wasn't the best of decisions. And it was only through I had a consult with Christian, coached by Christian, who's a very good friend of mine, also one of the Team Strong guys as well.
Yeah.
But I knew Christian's workload. He has over 130 clients, and my brain went, how on fucking earth do you manage to get that amount of check-ins done per week? And I just assumed he works 7 days a week. When he told me he only works 5 days a week on check-ins, he does all of those check-ins in 5 days. And he said they're all done by 12 o'clock, Monday to Friday. He doesn't do them on the weekends. Obviously, if there's prep clients and stuff, that's different. And I went, how? How? And I don't know why my brain, because I time blocked everything else, but my brain didn't clock onto the idea of you need to just time block your check-ins and have them at fixed intervals. So now I only do check-ins Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Once my client base expands, it'll be more days, but Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, 7 through till 12. And from those times, every single week, I will be at my desk from 7 till 12. I will not move until they are done. And I'll have like a shake or something in between, some form of meal that's easily deployable that I can quickly just do that in between looms. But that is that time for that. So, and then I've got the rest of the week to focus on content, to focus on this, to focus on that. But having those blocks, that is my time. And that's the problem as a coach, is if you do have that flexibility and you allow yourself to have that flexibility of the whole course of the week, then you're just going to spread your time out. You're not going to then prioritize and say, right, deadline by this point. You think, that's okay. I'm a coach. I can just do this whenever. I've got all the time.
Yeah.
And then that leads you into the track. But having those deadlines to have that. And one of the other things I've sent a link for the description is I use something called a Pomodoro timer, again, which is something I've learned from Steph. And ironically, also something Christian recommended. And in two slightly different ways, you can use it. The conventional way of using a Pomodoro timer is they say 25 minutes work and then 5 minutes break. It's too impractical. Nobody sits and works for 25 minutes and takes a 5-minute break.
That might be one check
break,
depending on the person.
Yeah, but it's just like, it's one of those where, like, I think focus times 60 to 120 minutes is where most people can stay focused on, depending on the task. If it's something that's really mentally taxing, you might only last for 60 minutes. Like if I'm reading a really in-depth paper, I might just go, right, 60 minutes, and then I need a 5-10 minute break. And the 5-10 minute break, if you're a bodybuilder or a coach, well, it's your meal time. So there we go. But you need to pull yourself away from the desk. You need to not be at the desk. If you're at your desk while you're eating, you are not giving your brain any space. And again, side tangent on that with the time, we'll get back to that in a second. But if you want to actually having time away from your work and switching your brain off, it's not going to be able to clear out for the next task. If you've got things from your previous task blending through into this one, you're not having a separation point, they're going to overlap and you won't be able to give something your true focus. So you're working at like 80% capacity all the time, which then means your time is even smaller. So this Pomodoro timer I've linked is called Focus. It's for Mac anyway. I don't know if there'll be a Windows alternative or probably a phone alternative somewhere, but like I'll set a timer and I'll work back from the end point of when that task is supposed to be finished. So I'll look at the task and I'll say, right, that's going to take me about 2 hours. So I'll set that 2 hours and then I'll set myself a 15-minute break to have some food, or it might be 30-minute break. I'll go do half of my steps or something like that.
Yeah.
But space it. So I've got appointments, but I have that deadline and that timer is ticking down on my screen. I'm not just like working at something aimlessly. I'm constantly looking back and going, right, okay, fuck, I'm only 3 check-ins through and I'm like 40 minutes down. I need to get a shift on here, because ultimately some clients will need more time, some clients will need less time during whatever week they've had, right? But
yeah, for sure.
Where a lot of people fall into productivity trap is they spend as much time as possible on everybody, and then they end up getting to check in there before and like, shit, this is going to take ages. And they spent their budget on the check-ins early with they spent more of their budget on the early check-ins that didn't need as much budget. They were very much just okay, yeah, we're sound, crack on, couple of changes, there we go. Because you will have check-ins like that.
Yep.
So that time blocking, that pressure and that scheduling and working back from it, but making appointments, you have to, like, especially as a coach, if you don't, you are going to fall into a trap of getting nothing done, because you just, it's the I'm my own boss. But you have to treat yourself like you're an employee, otherwise you won't get shit done.
It is,
I think that
it's almost like making an appointment with Steffi. It's like on the face of it, it'd be like, what do you mean? But actually it's like making a time block for that type of thing, isn't it?
Well, we put it in the calendar. Like Steph will literally just send me a calendar invite and go, walk 5 o'clock, sit at 7 o'clock. I shit you not. But it's how it gets through, because it just comes through and it goes through to my phone. I'm like, right, cool, accept. And like people are like, you really schedule, you calendar your dates, you loser. I'm like, fuck that. I want to make sure that I'm spending time with my wife. I don't give a fuck how it's done. For me, my priority is spending time with my wife. And if I have to use a calendar to do that, rather than get into a point where like we both haven't seen each other or spent much time with each other for like, a week or two, and then we're both pissed because we're not pissed at each other, we're just pissed because we haven't seen each other. Yeah. Or like, then you'll have it with like other parts of people's relations. Like if somebody hasn't had sex for 2 weeks, they'll be like, well, you haven't done it with me and whatever. Like, well, why don't you fucking make the appointment then? Oh, well, yeah. You shouldn't skip sex. Well, sometimes you need to, you weirdo. Like, don't be anyway.
Gotta do what it is. Like, it's relationships and communication adapting as well, because you've both got really busy schedules. Also, of course, the time that you spend together, it's that element of, okay, so if it's time blocked and you can look forward to that. So as coaches, I think sometimes we feel like we've got to be busy. And it's like, well, I can't have any downtime. I struggle with that as a bodybuilder anyway. It's like, well, no, I could be doing steps or food prep, blah, 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 all of the things that we can do. But actually then the quality time, if you're saying, right, 5 p.m., like you say, going for a walk, I'm really looking forward to seeing Steph. I'm not going to talk about work. I know sometimes you would, but like, it's like actually that time is quality time. And how nourishing is that, right?
It's so important, and again, it's something that I've learned from both Steph and I have learned together, and also something I learned from Christian is honestly, if I cannot, one thing I will say, because I will shamelessly plug him to the death. I've had 2 consults with him.
Well, I
One
know
for
Christian as well, so
he's just such a good guy. Like honestly, he's one of the people that's become one of my favorite people because he's just honest. He sees things for how they are, and his business mindset is insane. He just gets it, and he never compromises on service. And for me, I look up to him a lot because somebody who can handle that degree of service, who's at shows all the time, he doesn't miss the beat. He's always on his phone. He works like a dog, but he has boundaries. He has boundaries for his contact time. It says very clearly in his WhatsApp, contact times are this. I don't respond outside of these times. You set that precedence for people so you know you have that. But then he also has time for himself and to spend time with people. You never see the guy stressed out. Like whenever I see him, he's always happy. I saw him yesterday, and it's the usual, grab each other's bums and etc. etc. My favorite part of the week, to be honest, going to a bodybuilding show and having my bum gripped by Christian.
bro code.
That's it. But and this is because people will assume they'll look on Instagram and say, oh well, they'll just be busy all the time. They're always here. They're always there. They won't have any downtime. It's not the way. It is the way, because if your brain never gets a break, you never have that space. You can't pour from an empty cup. Is the simple, my favorite phrase.
Yeah.
And that downtime, like you're saying, those appointments are critical. And making appointments, like for me, I see those appointments in the calendar as I am making a solid commitment to my wife to spend time with her because that's important to me. And if we have to have a really good fucking reason not to, and if we have to make a reason not to, or we can't make the appointment, we then move it into something else in terms of, okay, have we got steps to do? I was going to do my steps at this time, but actually she needs to do them at that time because she's got work or whatever. Let's at least just walk and talk. And we leave our phones at home now. So when we walk, there's nothing there. We can't pick it up. We can't be looking at like bodybuilding and stuff. We just talk, and it doesn't matter what it is. We might talk about work. We might talk about this. We might talk about that. And sometimes we're tired or whatever, but we are still there out, just the two of us, walking our usual walk. It's about 30, 40 minutes. It's not long, but those 30 minutes mean the world to me. Like it's just just being with it. And you need to have those things. And, I think, I won't go too deep into like morning and evening routines and structure, but like, again, people have shunned and shat on that. And they've been like, well, morning routine, Mr. Miyagi, oh, self-love, self-care and balance. Like, no, morning routines are great. You start the day with something grounding and something that sets you up for the day, and you're going to have a fucking great day. Think of the analogy of stubbing your toe when you wake up, like, and it ruining your day. You started on a bad foot, unintended. But my morning routine is like the simplest thing in the world. I sit, have coffee, sit and journal with my wife. We just sat side by side on the bench, journaling, doing stuff. We'll say whatever comes to our mind while we're catching up and talking. While we're doing that, both of us will usually check our schedule. She'll check her emails. I'll look at my schedule for the day and just make sure I have my big rocks. I need to have these done for the day, for today to be okay. And then I'll have my okay, it's important for this week, but if I can get it done today, great, bonus points. If not, it needs to be done in the next couple of days. Then I got my small rocks, it would be nice. But my priorities are on those big rocks. So I've identified, I've not just got a big list of things to do. This is critical for today to be successful. They are time-bound, essential things that I have to have done. As long as I get this done, I'm good. And at the end of the day, I look back and check my checklist and say, have I hit my big rocks? Good. And then I can be at peace. I can go to bed. With that, so we've got the scheduling with coffee, sat with my wife and a cat as well, because we've got a little kitten. He's now becoming a big cat. And he'll normally run around like a madman, but he'll come up and then sit on the laptop and try and bite it and do all the usual cat things. But that for me is like my favorite thing: coffee, wife, reflecting. And then it gets into like more like usually in the morning, if my brain's like active and there's a few things that I want to think about in terms of like, I wake up and there's thoughts in my mind in terms of I don't want to miss these things. Could be some lecture content, could be content. I'll just quickly write a brain dump and I'll just do a quick, right, these are the things in my mind. Are these important for today? Are these important for another day? But at least just get it down so I don't forget it. Put it on a notepad.
Yeah.
And then I'll move into my activity stuff like posing, knee, shower. So I've made the commitment with my relationships. I've made the commitment to my schedule. I've reviewed it. I know what I need to do. I know what my priorities are. I've Done a little bit of work, because I always feel better if I either study or do some form of like just a little bit of work, some preparation, because I really feel like, right, because those 3 hours in the morning are like, you don't feel like you've worked, you feel like I've not done anything for 3 hours, right? So there's a little bit of stuff there. So start off on a good front, being productive, and then I'll go do like my posing, my neat from in prep, stuff like that, shower, and then work block start at 9 o'clock. But that's like the routine in the morning. But I've identified all those things, not because they're magical, but that it makes me feel good. Like I've thought about each one of those things and thought about when I don't have them, what happens? If I don't journal, I lose track of myself. I don't have any introspection. I lose a bit of my purpose and why I'm here. And once you don't have that, you're just running the fucking hamster wheel, right? Spending time with my wife. If I just went straight upstairs to my desk, I did that for a bit. I'd just come on to, I'd just start working on lectures or something, and just, I'd not have that time with her in the morning. And actually, I just really missed it. So, just being around it for half an hour in the morning made a big difference, right? So my families do that. They sit in cereal, they do whatever. They tell Timmy to stop climbing up the fucking curtains and they stand with it. But and the same in the evening. We have a wind down. Like I've got a strict cutoff of like 8 o'clock. All client replies will be done by like latest 8:30. So I shut off from work, laptop down at 8 o'clock. Very occasionally, and I do, because life gets busy sometimes and things get pushed back, I'll allow myself 2 days a week where I can go up to 9 or 10. But I've got a budget for that, right? And I need to make sure that if I'm exceeding that budget, I need to have a look at how I'm using my day-to-day time and think, right, what's happening here? I'm wasting some time somewhere. I need to have that time to switch off. So I'm going to bed at 10.
Yeah.
I'll do a quick blast of replies, anything essential. And I've got a system with my clients where anything that is like all my prep clients, they get forwarded through to my phone, like as an alert emoji. Because if I know that they're close to a show, it's a priority, right? And if something essential for any client, I get them to put it flags up. I just see, right, there's a big red button. That means, because there's always chit chat with clients, and I don't want to miss something in the chit chat. So I get them to signpost it and say, if this is essential, this is what you need to do to crack on with tomorrow and be successful in our coaching and client endeavors. You put that first. So I'll screen for that when I hit 8 o'clock, give myself half an hour. Everybody knows those are my times. And I'll respond to those, put my phone down. So that's put to one shelf. I've put my work to one shelf. And then I'll do my little journaling for the evening, summarize, have I hit my big rocks, have I done all those things? Yep, good. Shut that part of my brain off. If I need to shower, do some beauty shit, face cream and all that sort of stuff, manscaping, whatever you call it. Like, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on what mood I'm in. If I feel like I need some comfort and feel like a bit of a princess, then I'll do that. But I do like it. And then it's, blue light blockers on, Support Max Neuro PM, Strom, shameless plug.
Yeah.
And then we'll generally watch some form of TV series, which you've got far too many of. We'll watch 1 or 2 episodes of that. And occasionally, if I'm on my own, I'll read a book, because that sends me to sleep like that. So, but that's it. Like I've got that start, end of the day, structured. The middle of the day is blocked out with time blocking. Everything's accounted for, and I'm timing things, and I'm putting pressure on myself to make sure that middle of the day is blocked, so I can have that endpoint and I can switch off. Then I'm summarizing what I'm doing, going, you're good, mate. It's fine. You've hit your targets. You've hit your essentials. That part of your brain that's going, but there's still more. There's always fucking more. So shut up. I've done what I needed to do. Go to bed.
Yeah. Well, a lot of bodybuilders and bodybuilding coaches and people in this realm, we are people that have a busy brain, right? So that, that example running through that, hopefully, people listening that are in the coaching space, it's like, okay, so how can I be more efficient, basically, but also have priorities outside of bodybuilding, which of course is a message that is super important as well. We are bodybuilders, but we're also humans and people, and we do like to have and share love at times. So it's going to be cool as well, because you've actually offered for Steph to come on the pod for another episode together, so the 3 of us, and I'm sure we'll sort of overlap with some of the stuff, but I guess from her point of view as well, how she time boxes her day by work, with work and her commitments, and then how that sort of coincides with yours will be super cool. Now, when is your competition?
So I've got 2 or 3 more left. 2 to 4 more left. I'm not sure. So I've got the this is released on Monday, so it'll be after it happens. So okay, cool. I don't mind this, because I can still be a ninja. So I'm doing the Amateur Olympia in Italy this weekend. That's in Milan. So it's my first international show, and
Oh
I'm a
my
bit
God.
shitting myself.
The international
But
is the best. Oh, it's the best, honestly.
I'm really excited because I've heard really good things of, especially about the Italy shows. I just apparently they run really well. They're just really nice and all that sort of stuff. So, and I love Italy. Italy's got a real soft spot for me because it's the first place where Steph and I said it's the first holiday I took somebody on, like as a solo just adventure holiday, and it's the first place where Steph and I said we love each other, and it's also where I proposed to Steph. So we did a duo. I need to think of something more impressive for the third. I'm not sure how that's going to happen because we've already gotten married. Unless we can conceive in Italy, try doing that. Maybe in Italy. Well, I'll plan. I'll calendar. I'll send her a calendar invite for that. There we go. Done.
I
Anyway,
love
so that's this weekend, and then the weekend afterwards, it's the PCA British. So I'm rolling from that one into that one, which is going to be a fun back to back. Which I am running all the physique live guys through in a literally a play by play is like a nice little teaching point, which is pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
So if any of the coaches are wondering about the quarter, so I'm shamelessly plugging the shit out of everything, but I don't think anybody does this, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
sure, do it.
I'm gonna run them through pretty much everything that I'm doing, and drugs the lot, like how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, how I'm going from one show to the other, navigating the flights, all that sort of shit. So so there's that in the PCA British, and if I qualify for the Worlds at the PCA British, then I am 100% doing that in November. I really, really hope I can, because that is it's been my dream for fucking years to get a PCA Pro card and to get to the World. That would be amazing for me. So that's probably my biggest highlight that I want to go for. And I might do the NFM European, which is the week after the PCA British, but depends on how I'm feeling with fatigue and travel and stuff, because that's in Wolverhampton, just 2.5 hours away from me, and I'm so it's a long journey at the back end of all these shows, and I'm I could just start my reverse then. So
And they're pretty big shows as well, aren't they, Will? Yeah, and of course, like we spoke about at the start, when you're in this game for a long while, the expectations of what you want to do, we do it for the journey, and we've already shown that. But of course, we have expectations on ourselves. So it's, of course, making that call as to what's right for you. Like you say, do you need to reverse out because of the feedback, etc., etc. So yeah, it's what a great way to wrap it up, because we've spiked some intrigue there about, of course, the show that you would have already done, but what's to come. So if anyone wants to follow you on the gram, of course, it's the Anabolic Scientist, and you will know why now. And we've got the episode coming up with Steph. And if anyone wants to send in any questions or anything, of course, I'm sure you're up for DMs. And is it Dr. Steph on Instagram?
Yes, Dr. Steph. That's it.
So if anyone's listening to your sort of breakdown and how you guys are and has any questions, message any of us about that, and we will answer them on the next pod. But of course, thank you for your time, and I shall be keeping an eye out for this weekend. How exciting!
We'll see. Hoping.
Of course, staying in your own lane, keeping the tunnel focus in, and enjoying your fucking achievement, right?
That's why I'm just trying to keep my head on that, and just enjoy the experience, and enjoy the privilege of it. I get to travel to Italy, go compete in a show, and have a good time. So that's all I'm trying to stay focused on for now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, have a great time, mate, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Bye.